Welcome, everybody, once again to Deep Web3 Secrets. We are in the Hive General Discord where decentralized communities meet and speak. And today we have a very interesting guest, Vaultec. Vaultec is the lead developer, if I'm not mistaken, behind a project called VSC, set to revolutionize decentralized finance. Okay, today we're going to find out the answers to those questions. You may have heard about it. I understand that something is coming by the end of this quarter, and so we're going to also be talking about possibilities to maybe participate, run a node. But we have here Vaultec, and I just want to introduce Vaultec. This show, Deep Web3 Secrets, had a big hit a couple of days ago about the DHF, and I thought to reach out to you about the DHF because you were for a moment unfunded by the DHF, and I thought it would be fun for you to encourage everybody why they should vote for you, because you weren't that far away even at that time. So maybe the question is now irrelevant, but I still would like to start this out by saying, as you introduce yourself, do so, please, in such a way as to explain why we should pay you money. Because I think I understand we should be paying you money, but we want to know why. We would tell us about the magic, Vaultec. Welcome. Where are you in California?
I am. Yes, I am. Beautiful Bay Area. But yeah, I've been around in crypto since around 2017, 2018 timeframe. I was just mining crypto at that time. And that eventually ended up leading to me learning more and more about crypto and different cryptocurrencies. And then at the almost end of 2018, I got involved in Hive. And that sort of led me down that path of learning more about Hive and learning more about development and actually building things on Hive. And since then, I've worked with a number of different projects on Hive, one of which was DTube at the time that was very popular and active. And then that kind of led into 3Speak and worked out on with 3Speak up until now, when I've kind of realized there's a big gap missing on Hive to now VSC. And so we've been working on VSC for about the last year and a half or so.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in here. Fantastic. Yes. Suddenly, because I thought you were familiar, but then when it was all about this VSC, suddenly it seemed you were a new guy. But yes, I remember the Tech Coder X and DTube separated from who was the guy, the main guy with DTube? What was his name?
It was, what was his name? Hyman Danger. Yeah.
Yes, that's why I couldn't think of it. Okay, yes. Yes, okay, so we've been playing with this tech for a long time. Very cool, very cool. Okay, I love that that's a throwback, and that you've also worked with 3Speak. Okay, because one of the pushbacks I got, I'm going to pre-bunk my own comments. I got some pushback. On Friday, we have a retraction show. But Starkers reached out to me and said 3Speak has never received any DHF funding, and I said on the last show that they had. And so I see now why I even maybe thought that VSC funding was related to 3Speak, but in this case they're unrelated. Or how is that? I guess when you've been around for a while, can you talk to me about how you see kind of the sociology of how these brands go through the ages?
Interesting. Could you rephrase that question a bit? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Yeah, even as I was finishing it, I said that's not a very good question. But there's something interesting here about there's a difference between coming to Hive and saying, "Hey, I have this tech," and having been around for 7 years, building different iterations maybe of different ideas. Already that puts VSC in a historical perspective that I didn't know before this episode. So could you maybe, what does that mean to you? What did your time working with 3Speak, for example, what does that bring to the VSC project?
hmm Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of building blocks that I think kind of led to the inevitable creation of VSC. Part of which being like a lot of core like development knowledge, a lot of experience as well was gained um, from working with Three Speak and working on those kind of projects. I was also pretty involved in a lot of the Speak network side of things and some of the services that we built on there. Some of which didn't actually make it to live production, but some of the things that you can see like with S&C and breakaway communities, those things have been in use on real world applications. And so that brought quite a lot of experience actually running a project to some extent, not fully, but a lot of those kind of core leadership things, as well as other experience that I've had in my past career of working with in teams and working with technology and building products and things like that. So ultimately, that ended up leading to now where I'm at today, where I'm actually running my own project completely on my own, and hiring people and doing all of those kind of things that I have to do. So there's a lot of experiences that I've had with both Respeak and others that have led to making it at least giving me a much better shot at actually building something that is great.
Great. Now, I, I hope you don't mind me asking, how old are you? Because I have good information that you were involved with some spicy chicken sandwich recipes when you were younger, but you seem kind of like a young guy anyway, right? I mean, we're young, right? We're still
Yes.
young.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm in my early 20s, so pretty young in relative to some people that I know, but working been working a lot for many years at this point. Even before I really went into the workforce, I've been learning on my own and doing things on my own. So yeah, I got basically 5 6 years of experience working on this kind of tech.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So let me just hammer this home as like a DHF episode. Why don't you get VCs? Why don't you get some other people's money? Why are you inflating our protocol to pay for this tech? Uh, just in
Mhm.
a frank and blunt way. I'm trying to help you out here.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
Softball.
The answer for that is pretty. There's a few things, but the very quick and direct one is pretty simple, and that is that the value incentive of the network is not it's not something that you can really extract value from necessarily in a sense of like a typical company. So if you think of a typical company and a typical project, it has a product. That product has typically like intellectual property, IP, um, and then it has users, which is kind of like the cattle stock, if you will, that makes it valuable. That makes that that IP worth something relative to other things. And so when you look at it from an actual funding perspective, VCs want returns and they need to know what those returns are. And if you can think about it, there's many different types of funding out there. There's VCs who expect high risk, high reward. There's loans that kind of expect like generally guaranteed plans and reputation that work off of those bases. So, like, if you're planning to get a loan to fund your project, you have to have usually connections, or you have to have a lot of like backing, whether that's like capital or equity or other things that you're trying to give to the lender. And then there is grants, which is kind of where the DHF falls in because it's really kind of a grant type deal. And for the first two, we can't really do VCs since we don't really know, or at least I personally don't really know whether the network will always be successful. I believe very strongly it will, but we are not at that point yet. And I don't believe that the value extraction is what a VC would probably want to have, where it's 100x or 1000x return. It's just not really possible to do that. Plus, of course, we're giving away ownership of something to them, so it's kind of impossible to really monetize with VCs. And then with loans is a little better, but of course, like that's getting to traditional banking, and that requires a lot of work to do that and convincing and trying like you have to put like collateral on the line and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very complicated process to do that. Whereas we already have a community here in Hive that supports us and that I have connections with, and has funded projects in the past. And so it's really the perfect thing because we can run a project, we can run it cleanly, we can be accountable to community. We're building good tools that is going to impact the community. And those tools are ultimately going to benefit Hive, even if it doesn't mean that the network necessarily makes a profit, in quotes. It might not ever make a profit, but it'll bring value back to Hive in ways that are probably immeasurable in comparison to what's actually being spent on development.
Fantastic, my man. You're pretty good at this. Okay, so I got a couple of questions in the chat. I'm just gonna say to anybody in audio, add the little microphone emoji and put your question. I will be the final arbiter if the question I think is productive or not. And maybe later I'll say a little bit about that. But we do have planned to get near the end of the episode about a node because I want to run a node. But maybe at this time I can ask, for those of us who want to pre-mine this thing, we want to get all them tokens, we want to run them nodes. When is the question? And so I want to get back to that at the end, but let's just go to when. When? WEN, Vaultec.
So mid next month is the goal right now. We'll probably do like a soft launch where it's like not perfect and there's still a few things that we need to do. Since like when you start up the network, it doesn't have all the things that need to happen for it to work. Like, for example, it needs like a minimum of, like 4 to 8 nodes before the network can actually work. And so like we would basically say, hey, it's going to launch at this time, but we probably need to get enough nodes to actually make that thing running and make it happen. So, we'll have a post coming out sometime within the next week or so, actually solidifying the date. I won't say too much more on that until things are a bit more finalized, but it's coming up. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it not launching. It's definitely still something that's in flight since we're actively building it, but it's gonna happen.
Okay, fantastic. And kind of what I expected you to say is the Q1 ends in the 31st of March. So I mean, that's about what Q1 means. So very good. And I will mention that there's an eager cadre of people that would run nodes to try to help out new projects, if that's the way to say it. So we'll get to that near the end because we're all interested in what that means and all that stuff. But getting back to the funding, because this was brought up to me on the last episode with Lord Butterfly. I didn't know he was involved, and then he said maybe he wasn't involved, but he was thinking that VSC would be a way to attract investors, not in the protocol, but in HBD itself as a place to park their capital. And so I know that that's one of the first places you're trying to go to parking HBD as well as the Bitcoins. But I would like you to spend a few minutes distinguishing the difference between a guy who parks at capital and a VC in a protocol. Just a little bit more. I know you probably nailed it, but just hit it on the head again.
For sure, yeah. And for that particular thing that we were basically trying to accomplish, that there's a really important distinction between what people can provide as a community, which is still a very valuable thing. Is just they can willingly come in, put capital in, all of that. And is that a lot of these VCs and other partners have connections, right? And those connections are things that you have to leverage in order to really get big influences to start promoting and working with VSC. And that's something on Hive that I know people have tried to do with various marketing proposals and ideas along that, but not too many have actually been successful. And it is a hard problem to solve, really. There's a lot of work that has to happen. There's a lot of constant selling, a on my side, it's hard for me to maintain that because I'm also developing most of the time while also trying to play the role of, hey, do you wanna have a call and you wanna talk about how we can, how our protocols can work, and that takes up a good amount of time aside from development. So there's a lot of like juggling that has to happen in order to make all of these things work out, and that's where kind of Lord Butterfly has been a very good help with us. Is that he's been actually able to pursue these connections while I'm working on the big pieces of importance that is development and keeping things running. So
Let me jump
critically,
in.
those connections are things. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Good. I mean, it's just you could probably talk for 30 minutes, and then I wouldn't know
For sure.
where to ask the
Yeah.
question. Um, just 1 second here. Okay. So the I think this is a really important point, but there was another. I want to attack this at kind of a sideways way, because I feel like a lot of the communication around the DHF in the past has been unproductive. And it's been unproductive in a way that makes me think that people are just uncomfortable talking about certain things, but there's no reason to be uncomfortable with it. In fact, am applying for a grant, not from the DHF, but for P4G partnerships. Grants are viable things. Okay, so we can address this as adults, and one thing that would solve your problem would be hire more people. And so I could say, hey, hire me, I'll help with that. But then suddenly now I'm twisted, right? Because you're using a grant to pay me to not do the thing I was doing. So because we're a small group, I like to say Hive is a vernal pool. I don't know how many of you know what a vernal pool ecosystem is, but it's a little patch of ground that sometimes has water and sometimes doesn't. And there's special organisms that survive in what is really a harsh climate, because what harsh means is sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's wet. Now, humans are one of those organisms, but it's harsh because the conditions are not constant. They're changing, kind of like bear and bull in crypto. But anyways, I think we're a vernal pool ecosystem. There's a lot of gems, a lot of rare organisms here still, but it hasn't rained for a while, right? And so but a vernal pool can collapse, right? It's an easily disturbed or damaged ecosystem. And so a lot of people are concerned about a lot of little. Yeah, hold on a second. Put it in the chat, please. A lot of people are concerned with a lot of little details. The issue that I see is that no two people ever mention the same dang detail. Everybody has their own pet peeve, pet complaint, you might say. And as a sociologist, and even me, I have my own pet peeves. But as a sociologist, it makes it very hard. I believe we need to perhaps flood the ecosystem with more conversation, because we need to be talking about all this stuff. So how do you see the responsibility to deal with that grant money, the water, in a vernal pool ecosystem that's dry, and the realities of dealing with someone like Lord Butterfly, who, love him or hate him, he is who he is. He's a guy that I had trouble saying what project he's involved in. He seems to have his hands in a number of pies in the DHF. So, I mean, you as a person with these contacts, what responsibility do you have to your own project? Because, as you said, you can sell equity with a VC, but you can also sell something with a grant, So talk us through all these complicated social things before we get into more tech.
Hmm. That's interesting question. I feel like that's a hard question to answer, but I'll try to do my best to address it. My main two priorities is that we can ship what we can reasonably ship within a reasonable time period. Um, and I try to commit to goals as much as I reasonably can. Now, necessarily, will that always happen? No. There's always like circumstances that can prevent those things from happening, whether that's like, technical problems or personnel problems, or all of these other issues that can get in the way of actually meeting a deadline. I try to make that to be as accountable and as as accurate as possible. And then I'm accountable to my team as then I'm trying to actively fight for the future of our project. As in we have to have people that people are getting paid. They continue to expect to get paid. I have to provide a guarantee that what we are doing as a project is valuable to the community and something that we can get funding continuously, and that's something that they can rely on rather than it just being a random project that doesn't matter and it could disappear in a day. So those are my two main priorities from that kind of standpoint. I don't know if that fully answered the question, but that's at least what I kind of interpret from that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let me square the circle there, because basically what you've told me is the way I address that is making sure my project is accountable to A and B, and these are my A and B. And so I think it's a completely great question. Again, I'm trying to be the radio host. I have to. So I hope that everybody can address this. I think I said something very similar to Cal, and I'm happy to have said it to you. Now let's get back to, because I personally am of the opinion that even in a bear market, if we want to distinguish types of investment, even in a bear market, I think it's appropriate to spend money on protocol level developments, especially collabs and making available collaborations with other tech. So I think your project is one that would at least fit my criteria. We have Emre Baylor is here. One of the criticisms that maybe that Hive itself faces, so I imagine VSC is going to face something similar. There is some documentation available, says Emre, but it's not very comprehensive at the moment. Is the focus on creating an MVP and going live first, or starting with fully detailed documentation? Go ahead, Vaultec.
Good question. I think kind of a mix of both. So all of the documentation that you've seen there was originally built for the early testnet. So in a sense, that is kind of also our MVP of showing what is possible. And now we're kind of working on launching that mainnet version of it that has the security in mind and the level of quality that we need to have on an actual real world network. And that is gonna the documentation will lag a bit on that, at least at the moment, since things are in flight. But once we have that a bit more finalized and the network's launched, we'll update the documentation so it's much more accurate.
Well, I think that answers the question. You will be shipping and then updating, and that is exactly the answer. So very good. We've got Guilty in the house, and I don't know if he heard my comment, but of course we all could work better to make sure the documentation of the parts of Hive we are working with have great documentation, and that's something that is an ongoing process for any project. Emmerich mentioned it in one of his questions, but Hive Engine, of course, suffers with a very similar thing, and recently we've done some work to improve that. And Vaultec, you came in and asked a few questions to the witnesses about possibly making some simple changes, it seemed to me, to the Hive Engine protocol to possibly work together with VSC or build a bridge. Would you like to say a few words about the possibility of that? I know that's it's all future tech at this point, but where do you see that? Sorry, let me just say one more thing. It has been my opinion, although I love changing my mind. It has been my opinion that Hive Engine shouldn't need to die or even have to die. It is what it is, and what it is not. Or what it is not is exactly what VSC is trying to be. So why would one kill the other? It would just we would just have maybe a harmonious, different layers. I mean, so go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's been on my mind for quite a while now. On doing kind of a bridge or migration system or whatever really people ultimately need. and two of the biggest projects on High Vision right now, that being Splinterlands and Leo, have expressed interest on integrating. So I feel like it's a perfect next step in making both of those happen. That's
Fantastic.
yeah.
That was you. You're getting more concise. Sorry, I was trying to. So I'm catching up in
Yeah,
the
yeah, no,
chat
it
here.
didn't drop.
We've got another one really good. If so, this is the way. This is kind of the one I wanted to ask you. But so this is the way we can ask it now. If Block Trades would put his vote back on the return proposal, and it was to get unfunded, would you halt development or try to continue as is, modifying the roadmap as necessary?
Yeah, I feel like I probably continue doing it. There might need to be some changes there on like how much resources we can really allocate, and have to conserve that for a period of time. I have pretty strong faith that something will work out ultimately, since if the return proposal was voted up, there would be major effects on other projects. This has been something that I've worried about before, on like, hey, block trades could just vote up the return proposal and everything would be messed up. But I don't believe this will happen again, or at least it won't happen in the same way. I feel like there's some greater issues with the DHF that need to be addressed. That as long as that's something that people are actively talking about as an alternative to voting up the return proposal, I feel like that can be a valid way forward rather than freezing everything.
Fantastic. I really appreciate this, and let's try to stick on this topic, because precisely I see we have a game and there's limited player options, but we all do have cards to play. So one thing is that it seems to be that everybody's happy that we're talking more about it. So I believe that to be a positive development, and whether a few clicks by block trades is exactly what we needed to begin talking about it. But let's say this, as somebody who is, right behind decency is the top community voted proposal by the community. What do you think the metrics the community should judge? One of the things I like to say is, say what you're going to do and then work like heck to do what you said you were going to do. But a protocol like yours is very different from some of the other types of proposals. So how can we as a community, or how should we judge and exigir? What should we demand from the projects that are receiving the money, more than just to do what they said, I guess? Is there anything deeper we can get from this?
Right. So I feel like there's a few different things. People talk about onboarding a lot, and I feel like that can be one of those things, but I really think it's a couple of those. It's more than one. So in that sense, you can kind of treat it as a few different categories. One of them being the novelty of the project, which could be something that is like an experimental project, interesting, kind of a bit more odd. It doesn't necessarily line up into the next two. And the next one being like goal alignment projects. So if you have a project that is aligning with a greater goal, I feel like that is a valuable pursuit. And then metrics. And then obviously you would judge based off of the success of either of those three possible categories. And that's of course my opinion. I'm sure others have other opinions, but in terms of VSC, what we kind of fall into the novelty and goal setting, or goal alignment. Hive really needs smart contracts, right? It really needs cross-chain connections. It really needs liquidity access, right? Those are all goals that we can all agree on. I think pretty much everyone can agree on in the Hive community, and those are the things that we are accomplishing. There is a sense of also onboarding that we accomplish, because we have a front end that has onboarding features, and we have our own kinds of systems for making onboarding better. But we're not there yet because we're not launched, right? We're still in that kind of build out phase. So I feel like those three kind of metrics can be a good way to judge a project and why it's important that everyone can largely agree upon. We don't need to really argue too much about, is this project valuable because it hasn't onboarded anyone yet because it's not launched. But we can all agree on the fact that, if this is done correctly, that we will make things substantially better for Hive and substantially better for the current dApps in our ecosystem. And as long as we're all agreeing on that's the outcome, and the person who's ultimately doing the work on this is someone who has been around, trusted, who has the skills that can make this happen, and the drive to make it happen, then we'll be in a good shape. And ultimately, I think those things will end up happening.
Great answer, and I love what we're talking about. I've also been pruning some of the questions that are like, will VSC in some future date do this or that? So, that just because, that's an infinity amount of questions that could be generated. I'm more interested in what you're doing now and how you're moving forward. And what I've noticed is what seems to be an intention on your part to reach out and touch, connect with, talk to all the other leaders in the ecosystem. Has that been as part of your strategy, or how did that come to be? That it seems that you're in every Discord now.
It's just what you have to do, right? If I'm leading this project, it's something I'm building, and that's part of my responsibility as as the original founder, if you will, of this project.
Okay, now we got a lot of nerdy tech questions. Is there anything else you would like to say just on the social side of things or the governance side of things? Really, I could probably nail it home. No, it's okay, man. Emre, we'll get him this is the end of the episode. Exactly the reason I got a good hour on the DHF, and now we can nerd out. It's cool because I want to run a node too. Okay, so I guess that's about right. We got about an hour, but I would like to give you some space to just say any last words on the social or sociological aspect of DHF funding or decentralized governance, and possibly, and the limited moves that we have as individuals in the game of the funding.
Yeah, I think I've said as much as I reasonably could on that. I'll probably make a few more longer posts at some point, or at least share some thoughts here in the Discord about these issues. But I really think the next kind of steps that are worthwhile pursuing is we really need action, right? Like, we can talk about this all we want, but if we don't have actual action to back what we're talking about, we're not going to get out of the situations that we continually bring up over and over and over again. But I feel like this is something that that this is a way forward.
Okay. Everybody's getting in their last minute questions here. Well, this is not the right guy to ask that question, guy. Okay. Let's figure out together who the right guy is to ask that question, because it's not Vaultec, okay? So Vaultec, really cool. Now let's nerd out then. It sounds like you're available and you're into this community. You've been here a while, so I'm really happy to have you back on. You've showed up as a listener before, and if you are a guy that sometimes has your mic open, feel free. I usually do these type of roundtable stuff. So we are building out specifically this space. Deep Web3 podcast is one of them, but we would love the other shows. We got Buttcoins in the house. Buttcoins has co-host a show and might start another one. So, if you, listener, feel like you want to do a show, like, just know that I would be supportive of it. I would even try to help you record if I could. So let's get into the nerdy stuff. We got a GitHub question. There's Golang and there's Node. Yeah, Node.js. Why are there multiple implementations? Won't it be difficult to maintain both of these?
Yeah, so what you see there is the original MVP, and that was built back in 2024 and a fair bit also in 2023. And that, to put it very simply, that was not the right path development wise. And so we've been having to do quite a bit of rework into the Golang version, which is much improved from all metrics practically. It's in many ways way better, but it's also still catching up a bit. And so once it's fully catched up and where it needs to be for mainnet launch, then we'll be good to go. But that's happening.
So these are historical, as they would say in Galaxy Quest. These are the historical documents, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yep. Yep, exactly. That's the proof that we've been building things.
Excellent, excellent. Which I think goes to address Kryptonius Rex. I love you, man. I want to do a show with you, Kryptonius. I haven't looked at your DM because I'm recording. So, okay. I've got another question on the list. I'm getting some cool, nerdy questions now. But there was another question about. No, I think this is the next one. Should be Agro's question. If you were to link, smart contracts is such a funny thing. But if you let's just go ceteris paribus here and forget a whole bunch of pros and cons and trade-offs, and if you were to rank smart contracts by order of importance, and I guess maybe that's your job now that we're paying you. What are the top three, and then if you want to mention a few next, I'll definitely be working on this. I mean, what are the big ones to solve, in which order?
What smart contracts are important to first build, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, so what I understand about smart contracts is you make contracts, and they're kind of editable,
Right.
so you can deploy a smart contract or allow others to deploy, and if you deploy it, they can operate
Right.
within its parameters. So I guess I'm asking you, what I think is true is that VSC will have multiple of these sorts of things, smart contracts, and there's going to come out one at a time. And so let's put an order on it, maybe, maybe order of importance or maybe
Right.
order of
Yeah, for sure.
tech debt or whatever.
So
But
firstly, yeah, yeah. So firstly, our smart contracts are completely customizable, which means that anyone can build whatever they want, essentially. The only thing that really differentiates us from maybe like an Ethereum, in that sense, is that Ethereum has a lot of standards. They have like all of the ERC standards and ERC 721 and 1150 and all of these different standards, and so we want to start building those standards on Hive or equivalent standards. That might take a bit more time than just mainnet launch, because I'm sure people might have ideas on how those standards should look and how those should be defined. For us, we're really focused on building the first Hive and HBD liquidity pool is the very first thing that we plan on launching, since that doesn't require a lot of moving parts and it's kind of natively built into VSC anyway. So, or into a lot of the building blocks already exist in VSC anyway. And so that's really important for us because the current Hive HBD internal market is a listings based market, so it's not like a AMM or liquidity pool, which is not really necessarily bad, but when you look at it, it has still on average like 1% spread, and that's a lot of money that is constantly being wasted when people are trading small amounts and even larger amounts. So we want to optimize that experience first because it's something that Hive users really struggle with. Is just getting HBD back into Hive to eventually transfer to fiat or somewhere else, some other currency. So that's a big thing that we're starting off with, and then shortly thereafter will be Bitcoin wrapping and Bitcoin wrapping launch, which might when I say shortly after, I mean it could be a bit longer than a few weeks, but that's the next high priority is actually bringing real Bitcoin onto Hive in a fully decentralized manner.
okay, man, I've been thinking about Tommy Chong now. I can't get it out of my head. Oh gosh. But Vaultec, my question is this: hey man, I got this great idea. I'm gonna program a contract and I'm gonna take all the bitcoins. But I can definitely do that with VSC, right? I could program my own scam and steal bitcoins.
I mean, yeah, you can do that in many different blockchains for sure, but you can't steal the real bitcoins that we have, the real bitcoins that's wrapped on VSC. That's not possible.
Got it. So your contract will be good, but my Chong's BTC contract, anybody who puts money in my contract is an idiot, basically. I mean, right?
Correct.
Because we're
Yep.
this
Yep.
this
Exactly.
this ties us back into, I think there's been a couple of world figures that have done shitcoin rugs recently. So, or they call them meme coin rugs, but I call my own token shitcoins because they're just, it is what it is. But if what it is a scam, I don't make my tokens to be scams, but they're still shitcoins in my head. But obviously, a scam is another level. Is there any way this system that you're imagining will be able to protect users from scams like these?
Yeah, I mean it's same deal as kind of Ethereum where it's based off of some semblance of trust, or at least there is a front end that you kind of rely on. Like for example, if you go to MetaMask and you interact with a bad contract that's a known scam, then you wouldn't want to interact with that, contract address. And so for how that kind of applies to us is we have a front end that we're building that's a dedicated DeFi front end. It's a mix of a different things that I could probably talk about for a long time, but that is very important because um, it is meant like kind of a traditional banking application for crypto. So it's aiming to do all of the kind of things that VSE provides, like as in swapping, wrapping, send, receive, login, login with EVM wallets, for example, login with social wallets, and all of that, but in the kind of an experience and shell of you'd expect with the traditional bank, which is something that I feel like a lot of people, even on Hive and even crypto in general, lack. And so we're gonna kind of make that experience something where it's very easy to work with and handle things like tax reporting and just basic accounting and all of that, all of those kind of tools that we have lacked for quite a long time. And that's a very strong focus, kind of secondary focus, but it's still a pretty strong focus of what we're doing.
Okay, great. And this goes right. I got a question from Luis, and goes right into where I wanted to be. But I'd love to get Emre Baylor, if you can link them, or somebody else, if you can link the repositories, because we definitely, like, this is a good page for normies here. Last I checked, there's kind of like the high level summaries. You got a light paper, you got a couple of different things, but I'd love to get them GitLab. And so before we get into, no, let's do it right now. What makes you think Hive can compete with Ethereum and their level of funding? And for example, audit department, Ethereum, BSC, they have companies dedicated to checking smart contracts for deployment. I mean, aren't we just way out of our league on some of this stuff?
Interesting question. I don't think we're entirely out of our league in that sense. The way our smart contracts work are WebAssembly based, which means that they're very similar to stuff that works on other networks like the Near blockchain, for example, or Cosmos. So those are still pretty big ecosystems, and those are definitely places where there'll be a lot of people that already know how these systems work, and can, either audit contracts or audit our code. Our goal is at some point to get an actual audit and work with that. But of course, those can be very expensive. So that's something we're going to have to properly price in with the DHF funding and see how we can manage those kind of things within our footprint. And as long as everything checks out, then we'll definitely do that, which we'll figure out a way. Um, so in that sense, we definitely want to have those audits done and funded, hopefully.
I get it. And of course, I'm going to want my Chong token to be audited too. So I mean, it just seems like there's infinity dollars to be spent. What do you think are the lowest hanging fruits in terms of capturable value for Hive? If I had a user in the chat saying, "How does this make money for Hive user?" Walk me through what you
Are you
think.
asking why it's like what it gives to Hive users, or what it brings to Hive in general? Like
Well, I
how we
think,
actually.
yeah, I'm happy you to eat the apple whatever way you want to. But just try to
Mhm.
address that general question. What's the lowest hanging fruit? Because, like I said, I think there's probably infinity development in our mind.
Right.
From here, it's hard to imagine the possibilities. But I think there's some low hanging fruits here. So walk us through the lowest hanging fruits in
Sure.
terms of adding value to Hive and possibly hooking in other users. I like the Near and Cosmos reference. So that's really good for us to know. Those of us who are listening later, anybody have contacts in those ecosystems?
For sure. And yeah, and that's where yeah, and I've actually, now that you kind of rephrase it that way, I have really two really good answers. I would say the lowest hanging fruit would be that Hive HBD DEX. That's really the immediate thing that's going to be impactful and important. Um, and then our kind of longer term selling point, that is where how do we get Hive to the top 100 again, or top 50 maybe, is that we're building a protocol that is a cross chain interoperable payments and wallet interoperable payment, or a wallet interoperability layer. And so what that means is that EVM wallets can natively own Hive assets. Solana wallets can natively own Bitcoin. Ethereum wallets can natively own, I don't know, Cosmos tokens, and vice versa. And so we're trying to build something that is completely unique in nature relative to the rest of the ecosystem. And that's something that we've done quite a lot of market research on so far, and we have found almost no one doing the exact same thing. And yet, it is one of the biggest pain points in crypto. So, at the very minimum, we're going to make the experience of just trading HBD for Hive, which is two very important assets for our ecosystem, much better. And then we're aiming for this, fairly large, and it's definitely not going to be an easy goal, but it is going to be a goal that will, if we're successful, which it is it is a bet, it is a possibility. It's still something that may or may not happen, but if we are able to make it happen, which there's more than a 0% chance of it happening, we could easily get Hive to the top 100 again.
Wow, how's that for a stretch goal, audience? Okay, let me just go through the chat again. We've got a inside joke, I think. Question for Vaultec: how's the intern doing?
The intern's doing great. Yeah, I think it's been kind of an interesting strategy so far. We kind of needed an account that would kind of be a bit more funny, which has been getting engagement. I need to kind of see how that looks longer term. We definitely need to get our engagement rate up on both accounts, arguably. But I feel like that's going to be something where we need to launch first, and then we can start aggressively marketing a bit more. But that's definitely something where I'm at least happy to see the engagement on, and I'm looking forward to more what we can try to do with that.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've got people. Oh, they love numbers. They love numbers. Yes, yes, numbers. Yeah, well, top 100, it's a good goal. I mean, it's not what I would say should be our main metric, but very interesting stuff. Yeah, I mean, there was less competition there. Like 7 of those are Bitcoin now, wrapped Bitcoin. 30 of them are
Right.
Ethereum. So it's a whole different world. But I mean, there's 30 types of Ethereum. So, I mean, it really is just more that we're not on that level anymore. It's not about the number. It's not about the market cap. I don't think the market cap will come when we're on the level. We
Mhm.
one thing is we seem to have stepped backwards, but I'm not convinced that Solana is doing something better than us. So I want to be very careful that we're not learning the wrong lessons from failure, because I believe that what's happening in meme coins and yeah, right, it's inflated number. I mean, we're 7 years in. This technology is been developed, but it's a different road than it was back then when Steam was top 10. Um, but I would really like to say, Vaultec, bring me back. I lost my train of thought.
Value to Hive, bringing value to Hive.
Thank you. That's enough. Yeah. So I don't think that Solana is anything more than CIA funded money laundering platform. So, I don't think that necessarily what we're seeing is success. And that's what I'm I mean, anti-socialists could probably appreciate this. If what's being built doesn't is does hasn't even learned from our experience, then it's fundamentally flawed, and we can almost ignore it if not for I mean, it could be fun. Like, it's not wrong. We can touch it. We can play with it, but it's not gonna. It's not what Hive is. You know what I mean? It's not. It's just not. Now, whether Hive, like I said, I referred to it as a vernal pool. Whether Hive survives as an ecosystem, but as I look, there's nothing really to replace it. There's a lot of DeFi swap cross chain apps, and it sounds like your stretch goal could be done without Hive. I'm not sure if that's true, but it's a technology that somebody's going to make eventually, maybe. But the thing that Hive does, nobody else is really doing it. Nobody else has no founders. Nobody else has nobody's forked Ethereum yet, and 80% of the community go with it. So it's a very interesting thing. There's no competition for what we really do, and so I wonder if how important it is. And I do think it's very interesting, but we have to recognize we're investing in areas where others maybe have advantages or moats or a lead on us. But it sounds like you're very confident in what you've built so far. Why are you so confident? Is there something special about Hive and this technology? Or is it just the time and the place? Or why are you so confident about this?
I mean, I'm confident in what we're doing because the current competitors that exist in the market do not really satisfy a user completely end to end. And when you look at, like, even just in the cross chain interoperability space, that we're very focused on trying that's our goal. That's where we win at. You look at, like, for example, the EVM ecosystem. There's so many different interoperability protocols that exist. There's XLR, and there's Wormhole, but when you look at, like, all of them in terms of a completeness, they're only EVM. That's their only thing that they do. They only do EVM, right? Everything is EVM, 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 EVM. And then when you look at the people who actually do other things, like Thorchain, for example, or Maya, what they do is a lot better, but it is still not completely complete solution compared to what we're doing. And so we want to offer something that is a fully complete solution to end users that actually makes them feel like this is the next step forward, not just a small little walk, right? Or I don't know what you say, tiptoe forward, right? We really want to make something that compared to the current competitors and current things in the market is very unique in nature and offers something that currently no one else does. And that's a bit hard to kind of understand at first when you're not into the details. But I talked to someone who is doing traditional finance who is kind of into crypto. And you wouldn't expect that, like, someone from traditional finance would have any idea about crypto. But once you kind of walk them through the steps of, like, what we're trying to solve, why it exists, and use their current crypto knowledge, even though it's, like, very, not a lot less, they'll get it. So, and that's a really important thing, is that even the people outside of crypto that have some minimal knowledge on crypto will understand what we're trying to build, and that's the people that we'll start to bring in once this technology is fully realized. And that's where things are going to change in comparison to the others that currently exist in the market.
Man, you're good, man. You're good. I love it, Vaultec. It occurred to me one more question. Let me just push you one more time. Let's see if we can uh, find a way around here. But the the real technologies that we're building on are all possible a number of different ways, right? I mean, there's a lot of laboratory tech that is not practical. I'm thinking about IPFS specifically. It's very tricky. You don't know what you're hosting, so it seems to work really well, but it turns out nobody wants to run a node. Nobody serious is going to run that node. So, what I just want to ask one more time: what is it about Hive that makes you? What is it about Hive that makes VCS Hive technology?
Mhm. Yeah, and that really simply comes down to the user identity, right? No current, pretty much no one has the ability to have a unique username on crypto. You have things like ENS domains and other things that exist, but they don't have a true account that is like a Web2 account that actually has a username, human readable. You have key rotations, you have all of that kind of stuff. And Ethereum just recently started to catch up with that, with like the ability to have the account abstraction and some of those other things. And so Hive, in that sense, is really ahead. In another way, it's also behind because the way Hive onboarding is complicated for a good reason. But in many ways, it also is kind of at that higher level of maturity phase compared to a few other chains, just in terms of like user centric focus, which is something that I've kind of noticed for a long period of time, is that Hive has a lot of problems that tend to kind of mimic other chains, but in more of kind of a, it happens after the fact way. So, and that's something that in terms of strategy is really important, because we're trying to make Hive easier for these other chains, for other people coming from other chains. And once those users eventually get onboarded onto Hive, just as a basic user, they're through the Lite account, they're through the BSC accounts, and then those will ultimately eventually create Hive accounts. And that'll have a much, much higher conversion rate compared to, like, say, hey, get a Hive account, back up your keys, download keychain, make sure you have a physical copy, do this and that and that. And most people don't do that, or don't want to do that. And so giving that kind of on ramp will help substantially in actually getting people converted onto Hive as permanent users.
That is going to be an epic clip, man. Excellent work. Audience, I just want to ping you guys once again. Get your questions in there. We're nearing to the end of the show. I got that. I was saving a question for you, but audience, get in any final questions. What are the node rewards? We want to run them juicy nodes. What is the incentive for us to participate and learn about your code base here coming up at the end of March, or coming into April? Tell us about nodes. We're node lovers. Like I said, the vernal pool is full of these nerdy noders or whatever. Tell us all the juicy node details.
For sure. Yeah. So to actually run a node and make money, for mainnet you have to stake Hive. So you have to bring in some Hive and you have to stake it, and that'll determine your voting power. You have to have a minimum of, well, we don't quite know what the minimums are yet, and they'll probably change throughout time. But the minimums will be like 2,000 or 1,000 Hive to start off with. And then from there, your voting power scales. So as you do more, then you have more voting power, etc. But there is still like kind of a minimum there. Um, and then the fees from the network in various forms will get redirected to node runners, either directly or through like kind of a DAO account, a fund, which is something we haven't really fully realized yet. But they would be directly getting rewarded with HBD. So whenever there's resource credits that are generating money for the network, then there'll be some percentage of that will go to the node runners in a proportional basis to probably stake. Yeah, probably proportional basis to stake, but we have to run the numbers on those exact metrics. But yeah, so you run a node, you participate in a network, you produce blocks, and you get rewards in HBD.
Okay, great. That was it seemed like a pretty good overview, but we have kind of a follow-up question here. Now, I already get 12 or 13% or more by staking Hive power. Am I losing out on those rewards?
Um, Good question. Unfortunately, you are because we don't like VSC doesn't stake it for you. Um, that's the only issues. We don't really stake it. We might stake it in the future, but that requires quite a lot of engineering. Unfortunately, with the way Hive staking works and the way these schedules work, it's definitely going to happen at some point. But for right now, you are losing out on that APR.
Okay, I like your honesty. I like lose. I mean, but that is a risk because you have a direct competitor to the security level of the network there. I wonder if we could figure out a way to align those incentives. Maybe it is just figuring out that engineering hurdle. Um, I want to
Yeah, it's
just
engineering primarily. Yeah.
yeah, I think I understand exactly the challenge that would be, and I believe that answers Luis his question for now. Let's just you did answer this, but let's just do it again. If you do lose the DHF funding, what are the next steps? I mean, could we still expect a March date, or is the DHF imperative to your success at this point still, or forever?
I'd have to check up on that. I mean, worst case is something that I can, try to self fund, or see if there's other kind of options there. But I feel like that's not going to happen, so I'm not super worried about it at the moment.
Okay, maybe the most important question would be how long could you self fund, but that also is a very personal question. So I'll let somebody else
Mhm.
ask you that on the next episode of Deep Web 3 Secrets. Okay, guys, is there any other questions, guys? I think this is good. This is an hour and a half, solid. Uh, is there anything you want to shill while the questioners type in their last questions, Vaultec?
I think I've showed enough as is, either directly or indirectly. There is a bunch of other comments that I have seen here in the chat that were not quite addressed, but I will try to at least make sure to respond to every one of them after this. And if there's any other questions you have, just let me know. You can either DM me or send them in the chat. Doesn't really matter too much, but I'll try to get to them as soon as I can.
Vaultec, I would love to have you back on Deep Web 3 Secrets in the future, guys. Thank you so much. This has been Deep Web 3 Secrets. We are in the Hive General Discord. Follow us on YouTube, like, subscribe, do the things, everybody. Goodbye.